Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Chicago Bears at the San Diego Chargers in their Week 9 matchup played November 9th, 2015. These two teams went at it in prime time on Monday Night Football. We're going to go over the scores and we're going to go over the stats and give our breakdown and analysis. Let's actually go in and look at all the drives, the possessions in this game. And on the first possession of the game, the Bears got into field goal range, but Robbie Gould missed a 47-yard field goal. It was wide left, and so the game was still knotted up at 0 with that missed field goal. So now San Diego would take over with about 11.5 still left in the first quarter, and they would drive down the field. They got into Chicago territory into the red zone, and then Phillip Rivers hit Danny Woodhead for a 14-yard touchdown. Josh Lambo added the extra point, and it was now 7-0 Chargers over the Bears. So now Chicago would take over after the kickoff on their own 20, and they would get down into the red zone as well. They got all the way down to the San Diego 10-yard line, but then a false start would bring them back to the 15, 3rd and 8, and Jay Cutler was sacked by Ingram. He forced the fumble. Weddle recovered, and so now San Diego would take over on their own 23, not having allowed any points off of that red zone possession for Chicago. So the Chargers brought the first quarter to a close, up 7-0, and they had the ball, and they would bring it into the second quarter. They brought it up to midfield, but then their drive stalled on their 47, and so they would be forced to punt it to Chicago. The Bears would then go 3 and out on this possession, and they would punt it back to San Diego. So now the Chargers had the ball with about a little less than 12 minutes left before halftime, and on 2nd and 8 from the 22, Phillip Rivers dropped back, and he hit Inman. Inman got hit by Porter. He forced the fumble, and Jones recovered, and so now the Bears would take over after the fumble. So Chicago had the ball on the San Diego 41 after the fumble, and after a 3-yard run by Langford, it was 2nd and 7 from the 38. Cutler dropped back, and Jason Varrett picks him off and takes it back 68 yards for the pick six. The defensive touchdown and the extra point by Lambo would make it 13-0. Actually, it was he missed it wide left on the extra point, and that's why it was 13-0. So 13-0 San Diego at this point with about 10 minutes still left in the first half. So now Chicago took over after the touchback, and on the first play of their next possession, Cutler aired it out to Alshon Jeffrey. He picked up 47 yards. That brought the ball down to the San Diego 33, and they would end up with a 2nd and 10 on the 23, and Carey ran for 8 yards to make it 3rd and 2. Cutler hit Jeffrey for 14 yards, and now it's 1st and goal on the 1. And on 1st and goal from the 1, Jay Cutler hit Martellus Bennett, who was wide open in the end zone all alone. So San Diego's looking for a run there, a little play action, and it was a touchdown for Chicago as they put their first points on the board. Gould hit the extra point, and it was now 13-7 as the Bears trailed by 6. So now San Diego would take over, and they had their drive start on the 22. They would get out to actually, they had some penalties that would bring them back to their own 10-yard line, but then they brought it back out to the 25, and it was 4th and 17. They would end up punting the ball back to Chicago. So now the Bears would take over after the punt on their own 42, but they would end up punting from their own 50. So after punting it back to the Chargers, San Diego now had the ball with just over 2 minutes left in the first half. They brought the game to the 2-minute warning. They had it on their own 5-yard line, but they would drive up towards midfield. They had 3rd and 10 on the 49, their own 49. Rivers hit Woodhead for a 13-yard pass. That would bring the ball to Chicago 38. And then a penalty would bring them to the 23. Then Rivers hit Inman for 9 yards. Now 2nd and 1 on the 14. But with just 3 seconds left in the first half, they would go for the field goal. Lambo hit it, a 31-yard field goal that made it 16-7 as the Chargers extended their lead to 9 going into halftime. So now coming out of halftime, the Chargers got the ball first. They would go 3 and out, and they would end up punting the ball to Chicago from their own 23. Chicago would take over on their own 40. Now they would bring the ball into San Diego territory. They got into the red zone. And then on 4th and 8 from the 16, they would have to settle for a field goal attempt. Robbie Gould attempted the 34-yarder, and he hit the left upright. And so it was no good. So it's the second missed field goal of the game for Robbie Gould. So now the Chargers would take over after the missed field goal. They had it on their own 24. They brought it into Chicago territory just barely, up to the Chicago 49, but they would have to punt the ball on 4th and 7. So now the Bears would take over on their own 7-yard line, backed up against their own end zone, but they would bring the ball up to midfield and into San Diego territory. They would bring the third quarter to a close on the San Diego 5-yard line, 1st and goal, as Cutler had hit Jeffrey for a 16-yard pass on the last play of the third quarter. So to start the fourth quarter, 1st and goal on the 5, an incomplete pass would bring up 2nd down. They picked up 4 yards on the ground by Langford, and on 3rd and goal from the 1, Jeremy Langford would score a 1-yard touchdown. And now with the extra point by Gould, it was a 2-point game with the score San Diego 16, Chicago 14. So now San Diego would take over after the touchback on their own 20. They would bring the ball up towards midfield, and on 2nd and 10 from the 46, Rivers hit Antonio Gates for a 40-yard reception, and that brought the ball into the red zone at the Chicago 14, and they would end up with a 1st and goal on the 9. But then they would end up having to settle for a 22-yard field goal as they were not able to get it into the end zone. So Lambeau hit the 22-yard field goal, and it was now 19-14, with San Diego extending their lead to 5 with less than 8 minutes left to play in this game. So now the Bears would take over, trailing by 5 after the touchback. They had it on their own 20 to start the drive. And Cutler would hit Bennett on 2nd and 10 for a 10-yard pass to bring it to the 30. Cutler then went to Alshon Jeffrey, picked up 17. That was 1st down at the Chicago 47. Langford picked up 9 on the ground to bring the ball across midfield into the San Diego 44. They would pick up a 1st down with a 3-yard run by Carey. And then an incomplete pass would bring up 2nd and 10. Cutler went to Bennett. He picked up 4 yards. And on 3rd and 6 from the 37, Cutler went to Alshon Jeffrey, picked up 12 yards and a 1st down at the San Diego 25. Now an incomplete pass would bring up 2nd and 10. And on 2nd and 10 from the 25, Jay Cutler found Zach Miller. He made a one-handed catch for the touchdown, a 25-yard touchdown pass. And they went for 2. They gave it to Langford, and he got the 2-point conversion as they now went up in this game. For the first time in this game, the Bears took the lead 22-19. So they were up by 3 points with that 2-point conversion. So now the Chargers, if they kick the field goal, they would send it to overtime and need a touchdown to win. So now San Diego would take over with just over 3 minutes left in the fourth, and after the touchback, they're on their own 20. And on 2nd and 4 from the 26, Woodhead would pick up 16 yards on a pass from Rivers to bring the ball to the 42. On 2nd and 10 from the 42, Rivers went to Herndon. He picked up 12 yards to bring the ball across midfield to the Chicago 46, and that would bring the game to the 2-minute warning. But on 1st and 10 from the 46, Lamarr Houston sacked Phillip Rivers for an 8-yard loss. That made it 2nd and 18, and then an incomplete pass, but a penalty for offsides against Houston, who had just had the sack, would make it 2nd and 13 from the 49. And on 2nd and 13, Phillip Rivers was sacked for the 2nd time on this drive by Houston. So Houston gets the sack, he gets called for offsides, and then he gets another sack, this time for a loss of 10 yards. And now San Diego would burn a timeout with just about 1:20 left in this game. It was now 3rd and 23 from their own 41. An incomplete pass would bring up 4th down. So 4th and 23 and an incomplete pass. Houston putting on the pressure. And now the Chargers turn the ball over on downs with just over a minute left. And all that was left to do was for Jay Cutler to take 3 knees in the victory formation. It's the Chicago Bears win this game on the road, and they are now 3-5 on the season. They're 500 away from Chicago, 2-2 on the road. San Diego now falls to 2-7 on the season. They're now below 500 at home at 2-3. So the Bears, after trailing all game, and even with the 2 missed field goals, they find a way to win this one, despite the 2 turnovers by Cutler, including that pick 6, that defensive touchdown. But the Bears defense did a really good job of holding the Chargers offense in check. Of course, there was injuries on both sides. You had Keenan Allen not playing for San Diego, and during the game, Malcolm Floyd would leave in the first half due to injury, as he injured his arm, and he would end up, changing into street clothes at halftime, and so he did not return. And of course, on the other side for Chicago, Matt Forte did not play. He's injured as well. So both teams were missing some offensive firepower, but still the defense was holding these teams in check pretty well. The Chargers, can put up some points, but in this game they only had the 1 offensive touchdown. That was by Woodhead in the first quarter. And for the rest of the game, San Diego did not get in the end zone. They only had the 2 field goals and that defensive touchdown in the second quarter. So the Bears defense, even despite, they don't have the big names, they actually even got rid of their biggest name, Jared Allen, who ended up going to Carolina earlier in the season. The Bears defense actually did a pretty good job in this game at keeping the Chargers out of the end zone, sans that first touchdown. So they shut them out of the end zone for the next 3 quarters. And Cutler actually now breaks Sid Luckman's record for the most touchdowns in the franchise history of the Chicago Bears by a quarterback. So Cutler makes a little bit of history, and his numbers in this game: 27 for 40, 345 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and the 1 interception. He also had that fumble when he was sacked. And on the ground, Jeremy Langford, 18 carries for 72 yards and a touchdown. Langford also had 3 receptions for 70 yards, which gave him 142 total yards in this game for Jeremy Langford, the former Spartan. And also Carey had 7 carries for 28 yards. And through the air, Alshon Jeffrey, 10 receptions, 151 yards. Also Martellus Bennett, 8 receptions, 57 yards, and a touchdown. And for the San Diego Chargers, Phillip Rivers had 26 for 42, 280 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. And Danny Woodhead, he had 6 carries for 33 yards. Melvin Gordon, he had 11 carries for just 31 yards. Woodhead was also the leading receiver for the Chargers with 6 receptions for 78 yards, as he had a total of 111 yards in this game. And he had the 1 receiving touchdown. The only offensive touchdown for the Chargers in this game was that Rivers to Woodhead. Antonio Gates he had 6 receptions for 69 yards. Stevie Johnson, 7 receptions for 68 yards. And that was the thing, Rivers didn't really have anybody to throw it to. They were down to their final 3 receivers. No Keenan Allen. Floyd goes out, and now you just have Johnson. They had Herndon out there, Inman, but he ended up having Phillip Rivers had to just target Woodhead. And Woodhead's good coming out of the backfield, but if he's your number 1 receiver, then you're going to have some problems. I mean, Woodhead is a great player. I mean, he's a Pro Bowler, in my opinion. At least some years he is. He definitely can be very productive, but not having Keenan Allen, who was the number 1 targeted receiver before being injured, he was right up there. It was him and A.J. Green, but Keenan Allen is really the focal point of the Chargers offense. And on the other side, conversely, Matt Forte is the central focal point of the Bears offense. And the Bears, without Forte, Langford doing a pretty good job doing his best impression of Forte. He had numbers similar to what you would see out of a Matt Forte, so they were able to kind of plug him in there in that role, and he was able to be productive. And, Cutler coming up with a pretty good game despite the turnovers. The turnovers didn't really cost them too much. I mean, obviously there was the pick 6, the defensive touchdown, there's 7 points, but they weren't able to do anything else with the turnovers, as that was the only touchdown off of the turnovers. Is the Bears defense, they said they actually did a pretty good job. Of course, San Diego not at full strength. But let's look at some more numbers here. The kickers, Gould 0 for 2 on the field goals, with 2 for 2 on the extra points. Josh Lambo 2 for 2 on the field goals, 1 for 2 on the extra points. And on defense for Chicago, Jonathan Anderson, 11 tackles, and Lamarr Houston, he had 2 sacks, and Porter had that forced fumble. And for San Diego, Weddle had 9 tackles, Ingram had a sack and a forced fumble, and Jason Varrett had that interception, which he ran back for the touchdown. Look at team stats. Total first downs, 25 for Chicago, 19 for San Diego. On third down, the Bears were 9 for 15, 60% conversion rate for Chicago on third down. San Diego 7 of 13, 53%. They went for it once on fourth down. They did not convert. Of course, that was the final play, their final offensive play from scrimmage before the Bears took the 3 knees, that fourth down that they didn't get. Then we look at total net yards, 446 for the Bears, 339 for the Chargers. Net rushing yards, 109 for Chicago, 77 for San Diego. Then net passing yards, 337 for Chicago. Cutler was sacked once for a loss of 8 yards. And 262 net passing yards for the Chargers. Phillip Rivers sacked twice, losing 18 yards, both those by Houston. And they were within the 3 plays. There was almost back-to-back, except for that penalty in between. So then we look at the penalties in the game, and it was 8 penalties against San Diego for 54 yards, 6 penalties against the Bears for 55 yards. The Bears actually won more penalty yards, although they had 2 less penalties. Both teams had a fumble, and they each lost their fumbles. And then we look at the red zone. The Bears were 2 for 4, 50% in the red zone. And those 2 times they didn't get into the end zone in the red zone ended up in missed field goals. So they didn't even get the 3 points, from each of those trips, which would have been 6. And then we look at the Chargers, 1 for 3 in the red zone. They did get the field goals, though, when they didn't punch it in. And they were 33% in the red zone. And the time of possession, 33 minutes, 35 seconds for Chicago, 26 minutes, 25 seconds for San Diego. So this one ended up being a tight game. Not a surprise there that it was a close game. I mean, the spread was 3.5 in favor of the Chargers, but the Bears with the upset. But it was a 3-point game nonetheless. I thought it was going to be a higher scoring game. I thought these teams would put up more points even despite missing their offensive weapons there. Like I said, with Keenan Allen out for San Diego and with Matt Forte out for Chicago. And then, of course, Floyd going down in the game. But I still thought they'd put up more points, both these guys being gunslingers. But they did, combine for over 600 yards in this game, 625 total passing yards between the 2 quarterbacks, but only 3 passing touchdowns. Of course, Cutler did have that touchdown that went the other way, but usually you expect Rivers to get more than just the 1 touchdown through the air. Of course, if he had, maybe it would have been a different result. I wouldn't put that on him, though, by any means, as he is actually, without a doubt, the guy who's really putting in the most, doing the most work there and really trying to carry a team that is really, got a lot of holes in the Chargers team. But they play these close games, so they're not really that far off. Whereas the Bears are going more through a rebuilding phase. But John Fox keeps them disciplined, that's the thing is, no matter what the talent level is on a team, if it's coached by John Fox, that they're going to be disciplined. And they were pretty disciplined tonight. And they get the win on Monday Night Football. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and had a great weekend and have a great week and enjoy all the sports.